Not since these cars were new have they ever been this popular. Guys, if you don't know, the FOXBODY is back, right? And it looks like it's here to stay. But there are some modifications that seem to have been left behind. The question is, should they have? If you don't know, or if you can't tell, these are some of my favorite videos. I love talking about the old school stuff, right? So one of the real popular modifications back in the day to a FOXBODY would have been a set of Flowmaster mufflers. And it really sucks because somewhere around the early 2000s, mid 2000s, people started getting away from the Flowmaster. And I understand why to a point. Some of it had to do with the fact they were just looking for something different, right? They wanted a different sound. It had been done for years now, and they were looking for something different. So that's when MagnaFlow really kind of came in. SpinTech, which they didn't last very long. They kind of got disproven on the dyno. So, but now SpinTech's kind of back again. So people were in search of something different, right? So the Flowmaster muffler got left behind. This video, we're gonna talk about some of those cool things that really aren't around as much anymore. Sure, there are cars out there with some of these modifications, but it's not a popular mod. In other words, if you're looking to modify your FOXBODY Mustang, these aren't gonna be typically one of the things that you would do. Now, another really cool, popular modification that I'm kind of torn on it, to be honest with you. I like it sometimes, and sometimes I don't. And that's gonna be the Celine Spoiler, the whale tail, the bird bath. Like they got a bunch of different names. And I'll show you guys a couple pictures of some of the stuff I'm talking about. But these spoilers were super freaking cool, and I liked them. I liked them a lot back in the day. That was like one of the coolest things to me. But nowadays you don't see it very much. But I will say this. A lot of these modifications that I'm talking about are coming back in style. So I'm seeing more of them, but they're still not a popular modification to your car. It's not something you would normally do, if you will. The Celine Spoiler is iconic to a FOXBODY, right? You see that, you just know it's a FOXBODY. Like, you could put that thing up and like cut the background out of it, put it up on social media and say, what does this thing go on? And probably 60% of the people out there would know that that belongs on a FOXBODY, or they might say something like a Porsche, because it almost resembled the whale tail on a Porsche. One of the other things that I'm starting to see a lot more of, but not enough, are the cheese graters. I know this right here is probably one of the most hated topics, right? Because people are torn on this. You got the people that absolutely hate cheese graters, and you got the people that absolutely love them. There are way less people that love them, I promise you, than the ones that hate them. But still and yet, these are starting to kind of come back in style. As these cars get a little older, people want to restore them and do things like that. So the stock style stuff is coming back into popularity, and they're getting really hard to find because most people just trashed them, gave them away, and opted for the LX tail lights. Like, these are, I think these are the 84, 85 tail lights, I can't remember. Basically the same thing as a 93 Cobra. BBS style wheels. That was one of the big things back in the day. They came stock on a lot of cars. They did not ever really come stock from the factory on a FOXBODY Mustang, but your Trans Am GTAs and things like that did have them on there. I actually had a white 88 Trans Am GTA with the gold BBS wheels, almost identical to these. If I can find a picture, I'll try to show you guys. But the FOXBODYs did run these. Like, it was a pretty popular modification. Me personally, I've always liked them. They're cool wheels, and they're definitely a dated wheel, right? But it's still a cool modification. They're starting to kind of come back into popularity. If you guys don't know, LMR actually just made these wheels. So they remade these. They are basically dubbed the hot mesh wheels. And I had to have a set as soon as I heard about them. But the reason is because back in the 80s, like, you saw a lot of this, especially at car shows and stuff. They're starting to come back into style, but I think they still got a ways to go. Another thing are the louvers. So the louvers on these cars, if you don't know what I'm talking about here, they go on the back window. They were more popular on the 4i cars because now that is, I'd say, period correct with the 4i cars. Like, pretty much every car had an option for louvers back then, for the most part, like any fastback style car. So those were a really popular modification. Now I'm not really seeing a resurgence of those, but it is a really cool modification. And to be honest with you, it still works in the right application. I mean, I got used to seeing them so much that I don't even think twice about it. I see them now, I'm like, that car, it's like almost like they came with them. And I do believe that was a dealer option that you could get back in the day. So let's skip forward a little bit to the 90s. We'll go late 90s because that's when this really became super popular, which was a cowl hood. Now, you might think cowl hoods go back a lot later. You didn't really get the cowl hood back in the day for this car. They made a teardrop style hood and a few other options. But the cowl hood really kind of became popular with the FOXBODY Mustang, or I'll say with the Aero style. So about the time the Aero style came out, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, that's the 87 to 93 with this front end right here. The cowl hoods really became super popular. Like you used to see them all over the place with big hoods and stuff like that. You don't really see it that much anymore. As a matter of fact, a lot of guys do not like those hoods anymore. Like that's an unpopular modification, if you will, these days. I personally love that. And like, we're gonna be putting a big cowl hood on the Calypso. And to be honest with you, I'd put a cowl hood on this car too, as long as I could keep the stock hood put up. So let's go under the hood for a second and talk about some of the cheap, like free modifications that used to go on back in the late 80s, early 90s era. Now, granted, the parts did really start to come out for these cars in the 80s. In the late 80s, you started seeing heads for these cars and things like that that were specifically for the FOXBODY. Now, obviously, there had been parts out for a really long time for Mustangs, but they really started coming out with some of the different newer stuff, newer technology with these cars. Some of the cheap things that we used to do to these cars would be a short belt, aka bypass the smog pump. Those are modifications like that you could do to your car immediately. The day you bought it, you could get it off the showroom floor, you could come in here, you'd bump the timing up, you'd do a short belt. Those were the immediate things you would do. Nowadays, people don't think about that because that extra, I don't know guys, 10 horsepower that you would get from all that, actually probably about 15, but that extra power that you would get from those modifications, like I've mentioned so many times before, could be the difference between the race between you and your buddy, right? If he had not done these modifications and you did, there's a good chance you're probably going to outrun him, as long as you're as good of a driver as he was. The reason why I want to have this conversation today is because a lot of these mods are forgotten, right? A lot of these things we don't do anymore and people don't know about it. So if you're new to the FOXBODY game, this used to be some of the stuff we used to do to our cars. So I just think it's cool to go back and reminisce. There's a lot of stuff that I really want to cover and talk about, but this was just something fresh on my mind that I wanted to come out here and share with you guys. We've kind of covered this before with some of the other videos, but there were a few things that I left off. And believe it or not, front bumpers. So Stalker made a front bumper for this car, probably one of the first bumpers, like, I'm not gonna say aftermarket ground effects kit because there was other stuff out there, but the really popular bumper was the Stalker bumper for these cars. And honestly, they look pretty damn good. I've got to admit, like to this day, I still like one of these cars with a Stalker bumper, a big 4-inch cowl hood, and a Celine wing. Like, that's cool to me. I still like it. I know a lot of people don't, but I do. So I know a lot of you are kind of nostalgic like me in a sense, and you're thinking about, well, man, I'd kind of like to do like that retro style look on my car, but man, I just don't want to hear everybody's mouth. Screw them. Do it if you want to do it, and don't worry about it. If it brings a smile to your face, then do it to your car. I'm telling you, put it in a car show, right? There's car shows all over the world all the time. I mean, these things are taken back off again. So it would be really cool to see one of these things show up. An old set of hammers or 5-star wheels, which obviously those should be on my list. I'll show you a couple pictures of what I'm talking about. That was really cool. But you know, it would be really cool to see one of these cars show back up with all those old school modifications that really were probably done mainly for car show type stuff. It'd be really nice to see it again. Look, this was just a fun video for me to make. I love talking about this type stuff. Sometimes it's not about turning wrenches, it's just about talking about the cars, sharing the love, sharing the passion, and sharing all the different options that there are for these cars. I'm gonna go ahead, wrap this video up, but before I do, go down in the comment section, tell me what your favorite retro old school modification was on these Fox bodies. And I don't mean just aero cars. I mean on the 4i cars and all. What's something that you remember from back in the day that we don't do anymore to our cars, or it's not very popular anymore? With all that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this video up. And as always, thanks for watching.